Welcome to Ask for the Skinny podcast with a guest. I'm proud to present Bill, who will speak with us about our problems with debt and how this increases our midlife crisis instead of savings that could potentially be our buffer for the midlife crisis. Bill, welcome to the show.
Peter, very nice to be with you.
Bill, please tell us more about yourself. What is your story? How you help people get out of debt and navigate their life thereafter?
Okay, I'm a business lawyer. I have a law firm, William R. Mitchell. I practice law here in Orange County. I've been a business lawyer for basically owner operators of small companies for about 40 years. As part of that, I got involved with also assisting consumers um, in and working with companies in the debt relief business. And what I by helping those companies and those consumers, I learned about how easy it was for consumers to get into financial trouble and then to understand what their options were and how to figure out how to navigate uh, their solution. And so I learned both how they got into their financial problems and then how to get them out of their financial problems. I also recently wrote a book on the subject of, how to get out of credit card debt.
Can we talk more about credit card debt? Because it seems to be at all-time high levels right now. And you know so much about the background of why this has come about, or why this problem has has become, let's say, acute in our society as such. Can you give us a bit more background info on how why did we start accumulating so much consumer debt? What's wrong with us? Why are we don't have savings? Why are we spending more than we earn? And what's the reason?
I will get into that, but let me just to highlight your point, Peter. By comparison, we have the highest amount of credit card debt than we've ever had. It's about $1.25 trillion.
Mhm.
By comparison, in the early 70s, it was only around 400 billion. So it's not going up 5 or 10%. Over the last 30, 40 years, it's gone up 400, 500%. At the same time, to your same point, in the 1970s, the average savings rate in the United States was 11.6%. Currently, our savings rate is 3.6%. So that's a huge difference in the amount of Americans are savings. So to your point, we're spending more, we're saving less. How did this happen? Well, they've made it easy to spend. And I'll talk about that. And they've also encouraged us to spend. I mean, no matter what device we're on, television or Sirius, other than Sirius radio, television, on our cell phone, we're bombarded with ads to tell us what we need, not just what we. And then all at the same time, they made it easy for us to spend because anywhere you can go, you can charge or use the credit card. I'm sure you watch enough television to see all those ads. Jennifer Gardner, Samuel L. Jackson, Charles Barkley. What's in your wallet? They're begging you to use those credit cards. A lot of places in which you shop now won't take cash. They want you to use your credit card. And so while they encourage you to spend, they've made it easy for you to spend, but they don't encourage you to pay them back. And I want to give you my most favorite example of it, which is the minimum monthly payment. When you get a credit card statement at each month, it tells you the balance due, but then there's a minimum monthly payment. That minimum monthly payment is usually only 3% of the principal. keeping in mind that they're charging about 19 to 20% interest. And if you divide that by 12, and you're probably better at math than I am, Peter, that's about 1.8% per month. So if you're only paying 3% of the minimum monthly payment that's owed, over half of that payment is going towards principal, and the rest is going to interest. So you never pay off the credit card if you're making that minimum monthly payment. And if you'll notice on your bank statement, and I would really encourage your listeners to look at their next bank statement, because the law, the Federal Credit Card Act requires them to let you know that if you only make the minimum monthly payment, how long it takes to pay off the balance if you only pay 3%. And that's usually anywhere from 12 to 20 years. So again, they encourage you to spend, they make it easy for you to spend, but they don't encourage you to pay it off. Why? Because banks make money on the interest. They want you to pay a low amount again towards the principal so they can keep charging you that big interest. I know all, you know, Peter, this, but I think the average consumer doesn't really truly appreciate how the banks trap you into never paying off your credit card balance.
I would like to discuss a certain topic dear to me, uh, but a lot of people find it strange. Strange. You already mentioned that a lot of shops are not accepting cash anymore. That is like a protection so that they don't get robbed and stuff like that. My old ways are I like having cash in my pocket and pay everything with cash. And somehow, okay, I was, let's say, raised in the 80s. The idea was that you always have enough cash to get by to the end of the month, and you just spend what you have. And the advice of my grandparents was always calculated each month has at least 35 days. So, so
Right.
yeah, so you always have something to spare. Um, and I still like to use cash. Of course, I have cards because I would be, it would be impossible to be on the internet without cards, but stuff like that. I appreciate the utility, and when you're traveling, if you don't, you are limited to the amount of cash you can take with you, um, and all this stuff. But right now in the US, it's practically impossible to build credit score without using credit card. What do you think? Isn't that also a trap? Because then you start using card instead of cash. You have less orientation. You have to be more diligent when you're paying stuff. But on the other hand, you cannot avoid that because else you won't be eligible for a mortgage or a car lease because the credit score, if you pay everything with cash, your credit score would be 400. I don't know. Because they don't have data on
So,
you.
Peter, you make two great points. There's the convenience and utility of the credit card, but they force you in many cases that you can't pay. I'm like you. I'm old school. I like cash. I carry cash. And when they first started having businesses to not take cash, what I would do, I would hold up a $20 bill and I say, right here on this bill, it says, for all debts, public and private. I did that a few times and realized it had no effect. But I still think that you, for everyday items, to try to pay cash for exactly what you're talking about. Um, but to your point, if you don't put enough on your credit card, it hurts your credit score.
Mhm.
There's a component of your credit score called utilization. Utilization is the percentage of what you spend relative to the total amount of your available credit. In other words, if your credit limit is 10,000 and you've spent 4,000 on your credit card, your credit utilization is 40%. They like you to be at, they, meaning the credit reporting agencies, prefer you to be around 30, 35%.
Mhm.
If you're at 70, 80, that's a red flag. It's going to really cause your credit score to go up, hurt you getting credit, and they'll charge more interest. But so your point is you've got to have 10, 20% balance on your credit card, or they ding you. It hurts you.
Yeah, and you also talk about how credit score shouldn't be the most important KPI when we are deciding how to get out of the credit card debt. So, um, is there any advice, a general advice that we should follow when repaying our credit card debts?
Yes, and again, Peter, you made a really good point. The credit score was invented by creditors to tell you how well you're playing their game.
Mhm.
A credit score is a picture in time of your credit worthiness. It has nothing to do with your financial well being, they are separate. And if you have a debt issue, the number one concern you should have is getting out of debt, getting out of credit card debt, not to try to maintain your credit score. And I've worked with consumers before that are worried about their credit score. And I'm saying if you are overextended on debt, don't worry about your credit score, worry about getting out of debt. That becomes your number one priority.
So, um, when talking about getting out of debt, that would probably be early repayments because the interest rates are sky high. Average cards have about so 19, 18% interest, but the one for lower credit scores they go up to 40% a year.
Yeah,
So
correct. And again, we were talking earlier about how easy it is to get into debt and how people use credit cards more. One of the problems we're seeing a lot more, and this is particularly for people with, families, is that they don't have sufficient savings. They already are using their credit cards more than they should, and then they have some big life event, a divorce, death in the family, an illness, somebody loses some income. In other words, their job change. They don't make as much money. They're not going to have as many hours at work. All of a sudden, they don't adjust on the expense side. They lose income, and that expense is now added to their credit card. And you take a utilization, say, of 50%, and now it's at 70, 80, 90%. And we're using, instead of having savings set aside for these events, your kid needs braces, whatever it is, you're now putting big car repair, you're putting that on the credit card. And then you never dig out of that hole. That's what I see a lot, Peter. People have an event that makes their life harder, and they expense it. They put it on their credit card, and then they never dig out of that hole. And then they got to say, okay, what are my debt relief options? How do I solve this problem?
and
And if you don't,
sorry.
well, if you want, I could kind of talk about what their options are if they find themselves in that situation.
Yeah, first I would like to talk a bit more about what are the options not to get into that situation. Because when you're in your midlife, you should be smart enough to understand that you have to earn more than you spend. And the biggest challenge that I see is that people, like you said, that income is getting lower or something like that. They don't adjust. They don't downgrade their lifestyle. And I see that upgrading lifestyle is really easy, but downgrading, it's hard. Not because of the market, because you can always sell your car or or your house, but because of our emotional problems. So um, how fast should we start downgrading our lifestyle if we have if our income has decreased?
Immediately. I'm going to go on a slight uh, shift to say I represent a lot of business owners, small business owners. How they often get in trouble is they in their business lose a key customer or they have an additional expense. What the business owner doesn't do quickly enough is adjust, reduce his salary, lay off an employee. They think they can weather the storm, but the families are no different. If they have an additional expense that they need to cover or a loss of income, they have to adjust immediately. And this is the problem, Peter. They think that the credit card is their lifeboat, that they can just put it on their credit card and it goes away. It doesn't go away because not only is that expense on there, you're now paying interest on that additional expense. So it's a double whammy. So the sooner you can make that adjustment, the better off you are. And you are 100% right. Um, it's a psychological adjustment. A family, they have a way of life. They're in a community. They're used to doing certain things, having dressing a certain way, having certain kinds of vacations, and to acknowledge reality and make the adjustment is hard. And you just there's you to use an old expression, you just need to bite the bullet and make that adjustment. Realize that adjustment is temporary, and then get on the other side of that.
Okay, so that is if we still have time, but some things happen and we just get uh, uh, in the problem. How can then we restructure our debt? I know of many methods when we can start restructuring our debt with lower interest rates and similar. But what happens when this is not an option anymore?
Look, if you've got a serious debt problem on your credit cards, there's really only four options. And you're talking about some of the quick fixes, which I'll call the snowball method, or putting your credit card balance on a zero interest card for a short period of time. But if you have a serious problem, there's loan consolidation, credit counseling, bankruptcy, and debt settlement. And let me talk about each one and which type of person can fit in that situation in each of those situations. Loan consolidation is when you have a temporary problem, you have equity in your home, you still are making roughly the same amount, and all you're doing then is consolidating your debt in a permanent loan at a lower interest rate. This gives you relief on your monthly payment. So it's someone who still has good credit, has some security in their home, and are looking just to solve a temporary issue. Next would be credit counseling. Again, it's somebody who has some mostly stability with their income, had a temporary issue. You restructure your debt through credit counseling, where you go to a third party firm, normally a nonprofit. They create a repayment plan. They get some interest relief, and you pay back the full debt you owe over a 3 to 5 year period. But you have to be able to work within that plan. Next would be debt settlement. Debt settlement is where you simply cannot pay back the full balance of your debt. You need debt relief. You need a reduction in the principal. This is a little aggressive, but it works. And I want to emphasize it works. It's just not fun because you've got to basically stop paying creditors, default on your credit cards, and then negotiate. Either you directly negotiate or you hire a third party debt relief firm to negotiate a reduction of your credit card balance. It works. It's not fun, but it works. It requires a little patience, a little discipline. Finally, there's bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. If you don't have equity in your home and you really have a serious calamity or loss of income, go to a bankruptcy for lawyer, find out if you qualify for Chapter 7 bankruptcy relief. If you qualify for Chapter 7 bankruptcy relief, you push that button because that is a real reset.
Mhm.
It almost always wipes out all your unsecured credit card debt. Now, a lot of people can't qualify because they own a home, they have too much income, too many assets. Uh, so if you can't qualify for Chapter 7, then you go up to debt settlement. It's almost like, depending on where your debt problem is, whereas if it's a little problem, loan consolidation, a little more serious, but not that serious, credit counseling, more serious, you need actual debt relief, debt settlement. And if you got a real serious problem and need a financial reset, Chapter 7. And that's the 90-second tutorial on debt relief options.
Thank you. Just one question. I'm not expert, but is debt settlement something like Chapter 11 with companies?
It's very similar. Here's the two key differences. You go to the what they call Chapter 13 reorganization and
Mhm.
bankruptcy. You have to file something with the court. It's court supervised. It's so there's payments to lawyers. Your judge has to approve everything. You they give you they look at your assets. They determine how much you can pay back. Then they decide how much you can pay back. So I kind of always prefer that if you can't do Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you're better off in debt settlement
Mhm.
than reorganization because it's going to cost you a little less. You don't have court involvement, and you're not as it's not as structured and onerous. That's just my personal opinion. I'm sure if you had a bankruptcy lawyer, he might give you a different view, but that's just kind of my experience with consumers.
Okay, so who should get your book on credit card debt? Who is it for?
Well, so my book is called Say Goodbye to Credit Card Debt. You can download it for free on my website, which is called legaledgebdebtsolutions.com. Legaledgebdebtsolutions.com. And again, the book is free. If you've got again a serious credit card issue and you can only make the minimum monthly payment, or you can no longer make the minimum payment, or you're struggling to make the minimum payment, then that book is for you because it explains, it goes into more depth of everything we've talked about today, Peter. It's how we have a culture that encourages you to spend. How do you end up getting trapped by the banks into never paying back the principal? So you know it's not your fault. And then what are your options? And it explains all of that. And then it goes into more detail in each of the options.
Thank you, Bill, for all these insights. Before we conclude, what's your number one advice if we feel that we have a credit card problem or debt problem? What's your number one advice? Where should we start?
I'm going to give you two number ones. First, do not delay. If you had, just like we were talking earlier, you have a financial issue, waiting only makes it worse. The sooner you decide I've got a problem, I need to take care of it, the better off you're going to be. And if you've got a credit card debt issue, get information, objective information of what your options are. One of the reasons I created my website, Legal Edge Debt Solutions, is it has free content to help people understand what their options. There's an assessment, the Legal Edge assessment, that you can plug in your information, what your financial goals are, and it will tell you which option is best for you based on your financial circumstances. So my number one advice is take action and then next get information to determine what option is best for you. What often happens is a consumer has a financial problem. They go on the internet and they're bombarded with people soliciting them to sell them their option. And what I tell people, don't be sold a solution, Find the solution that's best for you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for being my guest tonight.
Peter, I really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate the conversation.